Dzień dobry. Unfortunately, that's the last word of Polish I'm going to be speaking here, so I'm afraid that the rest of it will be in English. I was hoping that I'd have some slides to show you as well, which I'm sure I will in a minute. This is obviously my second job is as an audiovisual technique helper, so I should be... Oh, no, that's not them. Very interesting slides, though, but nothing to do with the ones that I was going to put on. This is a test that's sometimes used for people with Alzheimer's disease, I think. So I am now being tested to see whether I am affected by the disorder. And I'm afraid it's bad news for me, as far as I can see. Would somebody like to tell me where I should find these slides? I can, of course, do this by miming the slides to you, or potentially by using expressive dance. But you wouldn't thank me if I did, I promise. It will be worthwhile trying to find this. Do we have anybody from the hotel who deals with these things? If we don't, I'll go and get the copy that I've got, and I'll just put it in the side of the machine. It's not here. So there's the files. That's the programs. There's it says slides. But that's just these. It's really... One moment. There's bad news. Do you want the good news first or the bad news first? Good news. The good news is that I don't have Alzheimer's disease. The slides weren't on the computer. The bad news is that they've been put on, so you're going to have to hear my talk. You almost got away with it. Ah. Thank you. Dzień dobry. It's a very great pleasure and an honour to have been invited here to talk about what solidarity might mean for people with dementia and their carers. It's clearly a word that is a powerful word here in Poland, and a word that actually is powerful throughout Europe in terms of the changes that happened because of the courage of individuals who are willing to risk in order to bring people together, in order to achieve something great. And I think that what I'd like to share with you in the next half hour or so is the vision that enables us to do the same for people with dementia. Because there really is the need for the sort of movement that made the changes here in Poland to make the changes that are needed for people with dementia across Europe. And that's not just for people with dementia and their carers. That's for society as a whole. What we do for people with dementia, and what we do for people with dementia if we do it well, will be of benefit for society as a whole. And that's what I'd like to think about today. So what is solidarity? Well, this is the definition in the Collins Dictionary of Sociology. Solidarity is the integration and degree and the type of integration shown by a society or a group with people and their neighbours. And here we can think about the solidarity that's shown within families, that's shown within communities, that's shown within regions, within countries, and throughout Europe and throughout the world. And here we have a quote from Samora Machel, the revolutionary leader from Mozambique, who said, "Solidarity is not an act of charity. This is not charity we're talking about. This is necessity for the society as a whole. It is not an act of charity, but an act of unity between allies fighting on different terrains towards the same objectives." And there are different things that we can do as researchers, as carers, as people with dementia, as politicians, but we've all got a part to play in this fight against dementia. And another quote from Sarah Ahmed, a professor of women's studies: solidarity involves commitment and work, as well as the recognition that even if we do not have the same feelings or the same lives or the same bodies, we do live on common ground. The common ground that we live on in Europe will be defined to a great extent by the ageing population, and dementia is the exemplar of the challenges that an ageing population brings. But I like this quote because it makes clear that things don't happen simply by chance. If we just allow things to move along, we cannot predict that we will achieve solidarity. We cannot predict that we will achieve the positive outcomes that people need. It involves commitment and work. And Alzheimer's Europe is a group that has been committed and has been working to achieve these aims. And I know that you are all part of that struggle. And so for me, addressing what we're doing here today and what solidarity means for people with dementia is our addressing together the greatest societal health and social challenge of the next 50 years. This is the grand challenge for societies. This is the grand challenge for politicians, for policymakers, for our things. Dementia is that challenge. And the way that we address that is by improving the quality of life and improving the quality of care for people with dementia. So this is what it's about. You all know the numbers. Some don't, but you do all know the numbers. There are already 35 million people with dementia in the world. And in technical terms, that's a lot. Yes? And in just 30 years, we'll see a doubling and a tripling of those numbers by 2050. And that's an increase not only in the developed world, but in the developing world. This is a worldwide problem. And in terms of cost, dementia is entirely exceptional. It already costs $600 billion per year. Now, that's more than heart disease and stroke and cancer and HIV put together. This is an exceptional illness with exceptional consequences for doing it right or for doing it wrong. So essentially, dementia, if it were a company, it would be bigger than Walmart or bigger than ExxonMobil in terms of its turnover. It would be the 18th largest country in the world, snuggling between Turkey and Indonesia there in the timetable. So it would be in the G20. It would have a voice because of its size. And it's up to us to articulate that voice, because the size doesn't go away. The nature of the challenge doesn't go away. And so that's what we have to work with. So how are we doing? How are we doing now? How are we doing at this point in time with respect to dementia care? So this is a slide, and I'll just talk you through it. It says, "I've got it too, Omar, a strange feeling like we've been going around in circles." And on one side of the boat you have, I think, very nicely shaped, reasonable-sized people, and then there's some very thin people on the other side, yes? And they're going around in circles. And this is just to remind me that actually there's a lot of fantastic work going on, and you will be involved in a lot of that work, and you will know about a lot of that work. We don't need to reinvent gigantic new things in social care and in education and in training or whatever. We already have things that we can do. Now, we need to improve those, and there's a need for biomedical research in order to generate new and better ways of treating dementia. But we already know a lot that can enable people to live well with dementia, that can enable people to have a good quality of life with dementia. But people very seldom get that care in the systems that we have at the moment. And that's the problem in our systems. It is much more likely for someone with dementia not to be diagnosed and not to receive care that might be helpful. And if you have good quality care, perhaps in terms of peer support in one area, you may not have good care homes in that area. So there isn't the range of services that people need across areas, and that's the challenge as well. And we've heard from the chair of the society that national dementia strategies are growing up all over Europe. It is becoming a political as well as a clinical priority. And it's becoming that because the size of the problem is difficult to ignore. And the opportunities that are there to do better are very clear. These are some data which come from the development of the English dementia strategy. Simple messages. One of the things that we need to remember, we in this room need to remember, is that we know a lot about dementia. We have lived with dementia, some of us, we have worked with dementia, many of us, and we know a lot about dementia, but there are still a lot of the world, a lot of the people out there who do not know a lot about dementia, who may hold totally benignly views that are wrong. So simple messages like that dementia is common but is not inevitable, that only 35% of people or so at the age of 90 have dementia. So most people don't. It's not a normal or natural piece of ageing. But actually also articulating at a country level the numbers. So in the UK, 700,000 people, with that doubling in 30 years, and the costs of £17 billion with that tripling. That helps to make the case. If you can demonstrate that there's variation, here we show a 24-fold variation in terms of diagnosis and active management of people with dementia in the UK. Again, good to be able to articulate that there are problems within a country, and this led to our national dementia strategy. I only put it up here as an example. Now, strategies are simply pieces of paper. It's how you implement them. It's how they change the world, how they change services that counts. But as an analysis of the sorts of issues that exist in systems for dementia, I think this is consonant with those other dementia strategies that have been developed. And indeed, the chair talked of improving awareness, public attitudes and understanding, professional attitudes and understanding, early and better diagnosis, and improved quality of care being three of the pillars of any consistent approach to improving dementia care. But it's a big job, and again, if we're looking for reasons why not much has happened to date, it's because it's complicated. But the thing to do when presented with a complicated problem is not to do nothing, which is what many countries have done up to now. The thing to do is to chunk it up into small sections, to actually start working out what your priorities are and getting on with doing those things. So I want to say a little bit about each of those three main challenges. So the first thing that would enable solidarity for people with dementia is improving public and professional, as we've heard, awareness and understanding. This is a doctor. This is an American doctor, so apologies to any Americans in the audience. They're not in Europe, but they might be here. You never know. This is an American doctor that's saying it is good to smoke. Yes? And not only is it good to smoke, it's good to smoke Camels. Camels are particularly good for you. Now, is this true or is this not true? Anybody convinced by this advert? Well, look, come on, he's a doctor. He's got a white coat on. You've got to trust him, haven't you? It is perfectly possible, perhaps unlikely, but it is perfectly possible that when this advert came out in the 1950s, that doctor sincerely believed that cigarettes were good for you. Yeah? It is possible that the woman who's underneath, who you can't see very well, she's telling you that they're really good for your throat. They make your throat all smooth and nice. The tar's very good for your throat. Now, of course, she may sincerely believe that. Now, we sincerely believe now, of course, that cigarettes cause throat cancer. Okay. So sometimes even well-natured people, like this American doctor, are wrong. They know the wrong things. And people know the wrong things about dementia. There's the stigma that's present about dementia, but that's going away as people come forward in countries and say, I have got dementia, and present an image of dementia that is not that of total disability, that is not that of total dependence, but is an example is Terry Pratchett in the United Kingdom, who's a writer of fantasy novels, and he was well enough with his dementia to make an entertaining television programme about dementia. And he was well enough to get knighted by the Queen, not for his dementia, but for his services to literature. So that's a different image of dementia that starts making you realise that actually those people in your family may be affected. And the two false beliefs are that it's a normal part of ageing. It's not. If it were a normal part of ageing, then that would be a reason for not seeking help. That would be a reason for not offering help. But it's not. The false belief that nothing can be done, that because we don't have a magic bullet that will make it go away, which just makes it the same as almost every other illness that we treat and that we have. The fact that we don't have that magic bullet means that nothing can be done, and nothing could be further from the truth. There is a gigantic amount that we can do, vast amounts of things that we can do, small things that we can do early on that can change forever the lives that people will have with dementia. So simply giving people, 4 sessions of education and support has been shown to decrease institutionalisation by 552 days, by 28%. That's a gigantic impact for a small early intervention. And so the second thing that we need for early intervention is good quality early diagnosis and intervention for all. Knowledge is power. You can't do anything if you don't know what you've got. There's a human rights issue involved in knowing what you've got early enough so that you can do something about it, make your own choices, do your own things. And this is the fundamental problem in the United Kingdom, but it's very similar wherever you go, that only a third of people at most ever get a diagnosis of their dementia. And when they do, it's late in their illness, at a time of crisis, when it's too late to prevent the harms and the costs that have accrued. And this is the solution. The solution is to change the system. The solution is to develop services that enable people to get diagnosed and diagnosed early enough to enable people to make their own choices, early enough for harm to be prevented, harms like institutionalisation, early enough to prevent crises so that when individuals go into a general hospital, people know they have dementia and the care can be trimmed to make sure that it works for them. And here we have data from a service that shows that that is entirely possible at a modest case. But it also shows the characteristics of what good looks like in such a service. Something that works for the whole population of people with dementia. Something that works in a way that is complementary to existing services. Because these are not services that are being provided in many places. And something that makes the diagnosis well, and that means accurate, good quality diagnosis, at the level of a specialist making that diagnosis. It means breaking that diagnosis well, involving the family with care and sensitivity, and giving the time for people to be able to understand. And it means providing the immediate care and support that individuals need from diagnosis right through to the end of life. And these are data that show that such services are possible, they're highly acceptable, they work for the minority ethnic groups as well as the majority, they can lead to improved quality of life for individuals and decrease in behavioural disorder. I thought I'd put in this slide here because it's just so exciting. It's fantastic that so many of you can see just how fantastically important and very exciting this slide is. Let me explain it to you. What we have up the side is quality of life, with a higher number, meaning better quality of life. And what we have along the bottom is increasing severity of dementia. And what this shows is that it's a score of 90 is the kind of cut-off between good and bad quality of life in dementia. So what it shows is that it is perfectly possible to have a good quality of life at any stage of dementia. And isn't that important? Because it would be awful if we knew that quality of life necessarily deteriorates with increasing severity of dementia. And that's what people think. That's what people think who don't know how amazingly people can accommodate to illness, how fantastically families can cope with even severe and complicated problems in dementia, and really how resilient humans are at dealing with all sorts of stuff. And that is shown in the ability, in these data that show that cognition, memory problems are not a good proxy for quality of life with dementia. But of course it shows something else as well. It shows that it's perfectly possible to lead a life with poor life quality at any stage in dementia as well. And so that shows us what our mission is. Our mission is to drive up the quality of life for those with poor life quality, and it is to identify from within those people living well what makes for good quality of life in dementia so that other people can benefit from that, so that we can maintain life quality for them also. The third challenge, better quality care from diagnosis through to end-of-life care, It's a gigantic subject. You will all be working in areas of this, and I'm not going to go into it in any detail except to just give one little illustration from care homes and something that's a very specific and a very countable harm, which is the use of antipsychotic medication for people with dementia. I was asked by the Health Minister in the UK to carry out a report, and we'd known for many years that there were problems with antipsychotics. We'd known that they caused morbidity and mortality, but nobody had done anything that would actually change behaviour. So I was asked to do this. We estimated there were 180,000 people receiving an antipsychotic in any year with dementia in the UK, and that cost 1,800 extra deaths per year. Okay? Now, that figure was clear enough and simple enough and understandable enough for things to start happening. We also generated an action plan that was actionable, using quality improvement measures, improving skills and laying in specialist input as well. And that got traction into the media. And the media started running with the story and finding out what the problems were. And that prompted politicians into action. And there's a tremendous amount of activity now to try and drive down the level of antipsychotic prescribing. I can't finish without talking about money, because money is important. It's not enough to show clinical effectiveness. We must show cost effectiveness. But also we need... I must apologise here. I'm going to say a rude word. The rude word is standard and poor. And obviously if you're from Greece or Italy or Portugal or Ireland or Spain, that's a nasty word, because they're the credit rating people. They rate countries. But they identified in their report just before Christmas of last year that there was no other force likely to shape the future of national economic health, public finances and national policies as the irreversible rate at which the world's population is growing older. And long-term care costs are paramount within that. That's the most changeable element of it. It accounts for half of the challenge. And that's going to look like, if we don't do anything about it, changes in percentage of GDP that run from 2 or 3% increases, which is 2 or 3% of GDP overall, to 18%. This is the reason why there's a strategic necessity for governments economically to act now as well. And here's a simple story that might help them. So care homes cost £7 billion per year in the UK. If we can prevent 10 or 20%, then if we can prevent 10% of admissions, we can break even. If we prevent 20% of admissions, then we start to release substantial amount of money back into the society. These are our modelling that we did with the Department of Health and also with the London School of Economics. But really importantly, there's a quality issue here as well. People have a better life quality at home. And if you add that in, the green stuff, you can ignore it. It's not English, it's economics. And we know that they're slightly unpredictable than economists. But what it means is that only... the reality is, of course, we can't ignore economics. I can hardly say economics, but we can't ignore it because it is Treasury departments that decide when money needs to be spent. And so, with just a modest increase in quality of life, about a quarter of that we saw in the Croydon Memory Service evaluation, and a 10% diversion, then using the nastiest models, these services are clinically and cost-effective, and that's acknowledged by the UK government. So these are the things that we need: vision, system change. We do need to, it's not just more of the same, it's doing things differently. Ambition in scale. This is a big problem. There are big solutions that we need. There is an element of investment, and it's difficult asking for money up front in order to save money later on at this present time. It's difficult, but it needs to be done if you're starting from a low base. Commitment over time. This isn't the work of a year or 5 years or 10 years or 20 years even. But in the next 20 years, we can really change things with the right leadership, and increasingly that's there from organisations like Alzheimer's Europe. So we can get things like these services that work for people with dementia, and we can add in the economic cost that shows that it saves money over time, and then we can develop policy that speaks to these things. And then these are data from a commissioning framework that is really starting to deliver memory services across the UK. And to finish, this, for me, said a lot about solidarity. So this is a quote from John Donne, who's a 16th century English metaphysical poet. "No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. So, that shows that we're linked together. It is absolutely the cost that these escalating long-term care costs, they're the greatest medium-run financial threat that we have. Dementia is not the problem. Good quality dementia care is the solution to the problems that our economies face. So thank you and good luck.